Hi and welcome. Today we're going to look at another interesting sideline against the London system. So d4, knight f6, bishop f4 is what a lot of modern, well, what a lot of players and courses are suggesting. And here I would like to propose the very interesting pawn to a6. And before you close this video and never watch my channel again, let's explain. Let me explain a bit why this move is actually pretty interesting. So what's the point? Well, we are basically telling white, white, I know that your setup is solid and pretty good, but it is also quite slow what you are doing. You're playing bishop f4, c3, d4, e3, knight f3, knight d2. That's a lot of moves. So that gives me the time to play a6. I can afford to spend that tempo. And that move might be useful to me later anyway, since often you have ideas of knight to c3, knight to b5 or bishop b5. And with a6 in, that isn't happening. Also, I'm kind of waiting to see what setup you want to play. Are you going to play f3? Are you going to play e3? And then I can change my plan accordingly. Also, I'm not moving my central pawns yet, so you don't know yet what pawn structure we are going to get. I might play with d6, might play with g6, might play with e6 or c5, or a combination of those moves. I might even play b5 in some cases. And finally, since there are no master games here, see, well, white might already be out of book on this move. Obviously, being a London player, he will have an idea. Well, he can follow his usual setup. But even then, we're going to try to make it as difficult as possible for him, which is why I suggest to combine the moves e6 and c5. So after e3, so e3 is the most played by far. It's also knight f3, knight c3, knight d2. So after e3, we can do a lot of things, but personally I like going c5. So let's follow an example line, something that, well, might very well happen in your game. So let's follow the most popular moves here. So c3, now e6, and if you play with black, if you play the Sicilian Khan or the Sicilian Taimanov, this pawn structure might be familiar. You can get a pawn structure like this from the Khan, maybe from the Taimanov. So in some occasions you might also, if you want that, go into kind of hedgehog structure, although that's not really our main idea. But it can be interesting in some cases. So here, let's say, let's just take the classical games here. So here you see knight d2, then bishop e7, and what we want to do in some cases is be able to play knight h5 and attack this bishop on f4 without the bishop being able to come to g5 or e5, since if it goes to e5 we can play d6. If it goes to g5, well, we just take it since we have more attackers. We won't play that in all cases, but it might also be an interesting idea to chase this bishop this way. White now usually plays knight to f3, and here I propose to take this pawn to get some clarification in the center. White usually and should play e takes d4 here. And now we are going to play the move knight to h5, chasing away this bishop. Let's see if we can get some more games here. Yeah, you see not many games played here. So the bishop can drop back to e3, which is probably white's best move. But then we can just go back with the knight to f6, claiming that we actually accomplished an important thing. We chased the bishop away from this diagonal here. So for example, if it goes to e3, we can drop back to f6 and claim that this bishop is a bit misplaced here. It would prefer to stay on this diagonal, or maybe here pinning the knight. But that's usually not what white players do. I think white players will often play bishop g3, hoping after knight takes g3, h takes g3 to get some pressure here on the h file. We can just wait taking it, and here white might try knight a5. You see now the knight is attacked, but we can't take, we don't have to take, and I think we shouldn't take. I think here that would give white too much activity. So instead of taking, we can just go, I think g6 here, yeah. So just protecting this knight. And if, let's say, bishop d3, we can play d6, chasing away the knight. And if knight f3, now we can even take over the initiative. You see these pieces, well, they are developed quite sensibly, but maybe not on the best squares that they can be. Also, this king is still in the center. I've noticed that white players often leave this king in the center for quite a long time, probably seeing or probably trying to find the best way to castle kingside or queenside. But here we can take over with f5, and I'm going to put on the evaluation since it can get a bit technical here. So h4 is what white can play, and here we can play e5, making use of the fact that the e file can get opened. So e5. If here something like castles, then obviously this is not great. This is a fork, so white has to react. This also doesn't make much sense, since here we can do a lot of things. For example, get this very strong pawn chain. So so normally white will have to take. Then we take out this bishop and weaken the pawns. And if, let's say, if white gets greedy and plays knight h5, he gets in immediate trouble, since we can make use of this spin on the e file. So white can defend it. Here we can just take it out. Bishop c4 can be played, an intermediate move, and here after queen e2, rook e8, white should play bishop f7, after which we can get two pieces for the rook and a better endgame. But if he doesn't do that, if he ignores it and, for example, just castles, we can go queen c5 and pick up this knight here on e5 with a totally winning position. So these were, I think, totally logical moves, which can which can show you that this setup isn't totally without any bite for black. So White played, I think, very logical moves, but in the end, black was able to take over. So let's go back and let's see what else white can try after this move a6. So the best move for white here is c4, but as you can see in the database, almost no white player will play it. They will go with their typical London system setup, or maybe some will go for a Jobava London type of setup. So let's say c4, then we can play c5, with the point that white can go in a Benoni, but this will offer Benoni type structure, but this is a very good one for us since we can immediately break with b5. Normally in the Benoni structures white plays a4, but here we are just too quick with the b5 break, and after d6 let's say something like this. We already have quite a comfortable position. Let's say play continues, for example, like this. We can infiltrate with the queen, maybe tickle this weak a2 pawn. If white attacks our bishop, we can just drop back, and after queen c2 attack his bishop. For example, well, this is not good since it stops the pawn, but f6, bishop f4, and here don't play g5 since white can sacrifice here and get quite a big positional advantage here. Our position is pretty weak here. Instead, just take out the bishop, break with e5, again taking advantage of the spin on the e file, which is why white probably has to play bishop e2. And after this and this, this is just a great position for black. So after c5, after c4, c5, d5, what white players might try, see here, isn't so good. If you just remember this idea b5, and after b3, you get a Benoni type of structure where your bishop is super active on this diagonal, and well, the typical a4 by white doesn't really work that well. So let's go back and see here what happens maybe if white plays d5 a move earlier. Then this is called the pawn push variation, where white well, somehow decided to put this bishop on f4, and it doesn't really make any sense. So you can just play c6, and after c4 go b5, put immediate pressure on white's center. And you can research this a bit more for yourself. It's quite a rare sideline, but well, I don't think it should give you many problems either. So now let's take a look after e3, c5. What if white plays d5 here? Then you can play queen to b6, attacking b2 here. Queen c1 drops a pawn to knight takes d5, so that isn't good. Also, someone in the blitz game here tried c4, but then you can just take out this pawn, and let's say with knight d2, d6. Here you can bring out the bishop to control this square on b1. And for example here, well, black is just better. If rook b1 here, then you can take out this pawn. So let's go back a bit, and well, white should play b3. In that case we can play d6, let's say c4, g5 is a possibility, but I like to well, keep things a bit more simple. Queen a5 check. White has to block probably with the queen. If he blocks with the knight, then I think with g6, this bishop coming here, maybe this knight jumping here. We can also play against this bishop. For life won't be that fun for white in this line. And if queen d2, we exchange queens, we chase this bishop again, and here we can just take it out and again puts the bishop on this diagonal here. So if e3, c5, d5, oh sorry, d5 here, you can play queen b6, and well, you saw a sample continuation a few minutes ago. Now let's take a look at e3, c5, c3, e6, and now not knight e2 but knight to f3. Here I think it's very interesting to play bishop to e7, and after let's go with the classical games again. Let's see. Yeah, after the main move knight d2. Here again you can take out the central pawn, and we are again in the line we saw before. Let's see what happens if in this position after knight h5 white plays the best move and drops the bishop back to e3. Let's also yeah, no games either. So here I propose to draw back to f6, and let's say bishop d3, then we can just play knight d5 immediately, or first d6, then knight d5 later. Bishop c2 is something someone tried, maybe with some ideas like this. Here knight d7, castles, knight d5, attacking this bishop. Maybe they can try to push their pawns. Then you see these central pawns can be undermined with b5. And here we actually get a pretty good position. So we don't have any major weaknesses. You could maybe say this pawn, but it's pretty hard to get to it. White's only try is maybe to play on the f-file or open things with e4, but then this pawn will get weaker, and we can, I guess, try to control the c-file or pressure this pawn on a2. So here you can play g6 to blunt the diagonal for this bishop. It's always important to remember that well, we have a dark squared bishop which can defend these dark squares, also this knight, and white doesn't have his dark squared bishop anymore, which means often this move is you can just make it, although obviously you still have to be careful sometimes for ideas like knight g5 and then this. But obviously since we are covering g5, that isn't possible at the moment even. So let's say white wants to double rooks on the c-file. We play a6, trading off his probably most active piece. And after after rook to c7, small trick, since if we take his rook, we drop our rook. But we can just protect the knight then, and after this chase the rook away and take here and have a perfect position. Finally, some players might try to play the Jobava London. Here I think you absolutely should play d5. And after e3 there are a number of things you can do. I think in one of my videos I proposed bishop d7, although then e6 was already played. But I guess you can still do it here. What's also interesting is here to play h6. Just not closing the center with e6 for the moment, since after e6 white might have the annoying idea of g4 and maybe pushing his pawns on the king side. If you don't play e6 yet, then you can still always take with your bishop on g4. So let's say h6, also restricting this bishop a little bit. Bishop d3, c5, and here d takes c5 is the most critical move. And after knight c6, knight f3, you can play bishop g4. Let's say white protects against the pin, and you can take out this bishop, play e5, play e4, take a lot of space, and I think you can just take it from here. So you do need some line against the Jobava London, but well, it's not played that much, although you could get it. Usually you get the typical London structures with e3, c3, knight e2, knight f3, which we saw in the beginning of the video. So to conclude, a6 after d4, knight f6, bishop f4. I think one very interesting thing you might try is to actually play a6, and after the move e3 you have a lot of choices here. I think what's really interesting is to play with this idea of c5 combined with e6. Maybe chase the bishop in some cases, maybe play d6. Once in a while you can play b5. It's very interesting. And the nice thing is after a6, let's say you play an opponent multiple times, you can play with e6 and c5 one time, or maybe the next time you can actually play with g6, play in a King's Indian defense kind of way, or you might start with d6 and have a number of different ways to play against the London. You can experiment with it, see what you like. Maybe you will like this move d6 better. Maybe you like better to start with g6. But the nice thing about this is, first of all, many London players well, won't encounter this move that much. Second of all, you kind of want to make white show his cards. Does he want to play with play with e3? Obviously then he locks in his dark square bishop. Does he want to play with knight f3, not committing his pawn yet, but leaving this bishop blocked for a while? Does he want to maybe play with c3, which I guess will just transpose in most cases? And our plan is simple. We basically combine plans with e6, with e6, c5, bishop e7, sometimes knight h5. We can push d6 in some cases. If the bishop comes to g5, maybe sometimes we can push h6, g5 to actually capture the bishop on g3. What's also important is once this knight is on h5 and this bishop is on g3, you don't need to capture immediately in a lot of cases. And also please look out for this queen when this pawn is, well, when this diagonal is clear. Don't just leave your knight hanging. You can maybe or exchange the bishop or drop the knight back or maybe play g6. Those are all interesting moves. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like, subscribe or leave a comment, and I will see you maybe in one of the next ones.